When we think of the multitude of national parks, one name comes to mind before any others: Yosemite. Along with equally famous Yellowstone National Park, Yosemite represents some of the oldest protected land of the United States, or anywhere on Earth, for that matter. Some visitors, however, get more than they bargain for, not only how dangerous it can be, but how little we truly know about our own world. Out there, beyond the safe confines of our own cities and towns, the wilderness remains just as wild and weird as ever. What happened to Stacey Arras, Ruth Ann Rupert, and the dozens of others who vanished into Yosemite without a trace? Where are they? Were they claimed by an ancient curse, or did something else take them? Something perhaps from the stars. On July 7th, 1985, a man and his 6-year-old son were enjoying their final night of camping in one of Yosemite National Park's many forested areas. It was roughly 11:30 p.m., and the father had decided to turn in for the night, snoring soundly in his tent while the boy enjoyed one last snack right before bed. The quiet of the evening was broken by an odd sound. Unlike any animal the boy had ever heard, it sounded like a strange buzzing or a humming noise. The boy, either brave or foolhardy, but above all curious, set out to find the source of the sound, a flashlight in his hand. After searching for about 25 minutes, he found himself atop a small hill from which he could see the surrounding countryside, and to his amazement, something big, perhaps 40 feet wide and 60 feet long, sat on the dried grass. It was egg-shaped, like a craft of some sort, about 40 feet away. It seemed to be the source of the humming. As the boy watched, he noticed the light streaming from what appeared to be windows in an open doorway, splashing hues of various colors across the darkened earth. The entire area around the landed craft seemed mired in a yellow fog or mist, thick, but not opaque enough to obscure a trio of short beings with gray skin, enormous eyes, and oversized heads. Each stood around 3 feet tall and seemed preoccupied with a dead ox or cow on the ground. To the boy's horror, one of these humanoids procured a shiny silver sphere. The ball left the being's hand and glided towards the animal's corpse, releasing a red laser beam that began slicing into the animal's flesh. It was too terrible to watch, and the boy scrambled to leave. As he did so, he dislodged some rocks, now drawing attention of the creatures. They turned in his direction, locking eyes with the child. He would later say it felt as if they were looking straight into his very soul. The boy broke eye contact, fleeing off into the darkness, eventually finding refuge in a hollowed-out tree trunk. According to the entry from the National UFO Reporting Center, hikers and family members eventually found the boy. Still cowering inside his makeshift shelter, he was visibly shaken but okay, and once he calmed down, relayed this fantastic story. Did the witness stumble upon a cattle mutilation in progress? It would seem so, but unfortunately, little further investigation was conducted. If his tale is true, were these the same beings another camper saw in Yosemite in November of 1999? This hiker was alone, sleeping soundly in his tent when several presences, each 4.5 feet tall, manifested in his tent. They communicated with him telepathically, imbuing the entire experience with a peculiar, unnatural sense of calm. The witness claimed that these beings did not perform any intrusive surgery on him, but instead expressed concern about humankind's stewardship of the environment. According to his report, his next memory was of regaining consciousness at his campsite without any further incident. From autumn of 1976, visitors were camping near Tenaya Lake, named after the same chief who allegedly cursed Yosemite all those years ago. And that's when they hear this low, loud scream right around 10 p.m. that actually ascended in pitch to a high wail. The witness had heard mountain lions before, but this did not resemble their cries at all. The possibility that they may have heard a Bigfoot is then reinforced by the disgusting smell they noticed at the same time, likened to a dirty dog and the sound of something running past their tent at a very high rate of speed on 2 legs. Others have seen the actual creature close up, too close for comfort, in fact. In November of 1978, Robert Richardson had set up camp alone in Iron Meadow, about 2,000 feet below Iron Lakes, but above Yosemite's Fresno Dome. In the dim light of his campfire, he saw something immense approaching in complete silence. It stood 8 feet tall and looked almost like a gigantic man. The orange glow of the firelight eventually revealed more details: broad shoulders, a thick neck, and a black, bearded face that housed a pair of deep-set-in eyes and a wide nose with flaring nostrils. Richardson and the Bigfoot locked eyes for a few nerve-wracking moments before he reached for his gun, taking eyes off the beast for only a moment. When he looked back, the creature was gone. Though he hadn't heard anything, nor did he find any evidence the following morning, Richardson seems to feel there was something unnatural about the encounter. His report noted the rich history of the Iron Meadow area, which, according to him, has yielded an abundance of Native American artifacts. Is there a correlation there? Anyone living in northwestern California on their way home from vacation might find their most direct route taking them through Yosemite National Park, especially if their journey takes them along Highway 120. Such was the case for one family on their way back from Nevada early one morning in the summer of 1998. Around 2 a.m., a family near Tioga Pass were startled to catch a bipedal shape in their headlights. It was covered in silvery black fur, perched on a rock by the roadside. With a careful but deliberate movement, the Bigfoot raised its body from a crouching posture to stretch fully upright. It seemed to stand just under 6 feet tall and had a very thin build. The witnesses said it seemed as if the creature had been looking at something in the road before the headlights caught its attention. As their car passed by, its head turned to watch them. None of the passengers seemed in a hurry to turn around and to try and find it. Could you blame them, right? That fall, 2 hunters in the early morning hours were scouting for deer along Yosemite National Park's border when they noticed what they thought at first was a man wearing all black, slogging up a nearby ridge. The figure had no equipment, no light, no gun, nothing, but instead began digging in the brush for about a half an hour. The hunters thought this peculiar. Not only was the figure's behavior erratic, but they had been camped out here for 11 days and had seen no indication that anybody else here was in the area. As the sun began to rise after 6 a.m., the thing set off in the hunters' direction. It wasn't long until they realized what they were watching wasn't a man. By the time it had close to 50 yards, they could see it was shaped like a person, but was covered in thick, jet-black, shiny hair and had red rings around its eyes. Hoping to get a better look, one of the hunters quietly grabbed his rifle from the truck, taking advantage of the fact they had not been spotted yet. He pulls up the scope, but as he did, this thing darts behind a tree and never emerged. After a while, the hunters tried to find where the creature had gone, but could not discern any suitable hiding place. It was as if it had simply just stepped behind the tree and out of existence. Sightings are one thing, but what do we have of evidence regarding Bigfoot in Yosemite? While plenty of eyewitness sightings might involve the collection of hair or even plaster casts of footprints, there is some indication that a group of miners may have stumbled long ago upon the holy grail of cryptozoology, a Bigfoot body, or at least the mummified remains of a gigantic human. It was 1885, and a group of men were actually seeking fortune and fame near Yosemite's Valley, Bridalveil Falls. There was gold in them hills, and silver too, they believed, but their efforts had turned up little in the way of encouragement. It was on his lunch break that Mr. G.F. Martindale noticed a curious pile of rubble along the wall of a nearby cliff. Martindale, who was supervising the other miners, immediately recognized the pile as the work of human hands, and would set his men to work to removing the stones. If the story is to be believed, the miners removed the debris in short order, revealing a fissure in the rock that had been sealed up by a stone wall. All present marveled at the skill involved, which consisted of layered rock, each an eighth of an inch thick. In fact, one miner declared it as pretty as any wall on that building that I've ever seen. Curiosity turned to greed, and had they stumbled upon a workable mine, or better yet, some overlooked buried treasure. Without a moment's hesitation, the mining party set to work disassembling the wall and had soon to open up enough to peer inside. The faint light from their lanterns barely revealed anything, save that there was indeed a space within. Once the rest of the stones were removed, their greed in turn fell to disappointment. There was no treasure here. The only thing worth noting was a long shape perched atop a stone shelf built into the rock. It wasn't the riches they had hoped for, but if the miners had any foresight, they might have grasped the magnitude of what truly lay before them. The shape was actually an immense mummy, around 6'8" tall, and seemed to be swaddled in animal skins covered in a fine sheen of light gray powder. Unfolding the wrappings, the miners were able to discern that the remains were female, and that she was clutching a child's body to her chest. His miners may have been disappointed, but Martindale apparently realized that the specimen needed to be preserved, so he had them dutifully package the corpse and ship it off to Los Angeles. There, it was allegedly examined by unnamed scientists who claimed that the individual must have stood over 7 feet when alive and was substantially ancient, predating even the local Awenatchee themselves. What happened to this priceless discovery remains uncertain. As with similar giant remains, allegedly unearthed from other indigenous American sites, it has been long lost to history, or perhaps molders in some dusty corner of the Smithsonian Institute's collection. The only additional insight we can glean from the story comes from late Bigfoot researcher Bobby Short, who claimed that similar giants fill the legends of the Awenatchee people. In one such tale, a giant named Ulelen descended into the Yosemite Valley long before white settlers, bringing with him a posse of other giants who engaged in open warfare with the tribe. Like other cannibalistic giants in indigenous American lore, Ulelen and his band of monsters delighted in abducting the Awenatchee, taking them back to their lair at the base of Cascade Falls. Interestingly, there is a correlation here. In Northern California, many of the natives there refer to similar upright bipedal creatures that would come in their villages in the middle of the night, stealing their children and women away to cannibalize on them, were referred to as mountain devils. While down here in Cascade Falls, they would strip them into pieces, dry them like jerky, and feast upon their flesh. Eventually, the Awenatchee grew tired of this predation and eradicated the giants. was the giant specimen recovered at Bridal Veil Falls, one of Ul-El-N's kin. Bobby Short provided some intriguing insight to her own retelling of the Yosemite giant story. According to her, the Awenatchee left behind detailed descriptions of their burial rites. These included wrapping their dead in animal skins just prior to cremation. In 1990, she wrote this: "If you recall, the mummy of the Yosemite Valley was wrapped in the skins of animals and covered with a fine gray powder. Ashes, perhaps. Today, Bridal Veil Falls retains a haunted reputation. Some visitors describe hearing odd voices at nighttime, barely audible underneath the roaring thunder of the waterfall. Awenatchee legend holds the area is home to Pohono, a malicious spirit with a reputation for luring careless individuals over the falls to their doom. Pohono manifests in the midst of the cascading waters as a shimmering phantom, beckoning travelers ever closer to the edge, until a misstep or a sudden gust of wind ushers them over the edge. Pohono is at least occasionally successful in this endeavor to the present day, as deaths from falling still occur around Bridal Veil Falls. We are left to wonder if the giant mummy of Yosemite Valley is somehow responsible or related somewhat to the tales of Pohono." Bridal Veil Falls isn't the only landmark that is allegedly haunted. To the list of other strange phenomena in Yosemite National Park, we can add the ghost of Grouse Lake. This spirit first occurred in the historical record circa 1857 in the writings of Galen Clark, who would become Yosemite's first park ranger 10 years after. Clark was surveying Grouse Lake's shoreline when he heard something absolutely uncanny emanating from the waves. It sounded to him like a lost or frightened puppy. When he brought the story to his indigenous colleagues, they informed him that such sounds were commonplace in the vicinity of the lake. They then explained the ghost of Grouse Lake was not a dog. However, it was the spirit of a Native American boy who had met his end in its frigid waters. Their people made it a point to avoid the body of water entirely, for they believed that anybody on its shores who heard the boy and investigated would meet the same fate: the specter dragging its victims by the legs to the bottom of the lake until they drowned. Paranormal author Brent Swancer related another harrowing story from Yosemite National Park, this one more recent. 26-year-old camper Christopher Thompson claimed that, after setting up his tent, he went in search of some firewood in the nearby forest, only to find an old man waiting beside his tent when he had returned. The man appeared to be Native American, and wore around his neck a curious bell or charm which seemed to ring whenever he would move. The man explained to Thompson that he was lost. Would he be willing to give him a lift to the nearest road? Thompson was perplexed, but by no means frightened by this visitor. But at the same time, night was fast approaching, so to him, the most prudent course of action was to not only take him to the road, but all the way to the nearest ranger's office. The man agreed, and the two walked to Thompson's truck. Instead of hopping in the passenger seat, the old man opened the rear door. When Thompson offered the passenger seat to his new friend, the old man declined and insisted on sitting in the back. The two set off down the road, and as the sun sank down below the trees and darkness crept over the forest, Thompson heard something. It was quiet at first, but he was able to discern bits and pieces. It sounded like some unidentifiable language, and it was coming from the back seat. Thompson spared a glance in his rearview mirror and saw the old man rocking gently back and forth, muttering to himself. Alarmed but with no desire to be rude, he rushed to the ranger's office as quickly as he could. Somewhere along the way, the man had vanished. At a complete loss for what to do, Thompson then reported the entire affair to the rangers, who didn't seem to be able to offer much in the way of an explanation or offer any help. There is an unsettling coda to Thompson's tale. He would later discover something in his back seat, apparently left behind by the old man. It seemed to be a small pouch made of animal hide and held a curious array of stones and herbs inside. Thompson claimed that Yosemite Valley locals told him the object was cursed, and that he might be as well. Since then, Thompson struggles with nightmares, perhaps even sleep paralysis. Each time he dreams that he cannot move, the only thing he can hear is the strange chanting and mumbling in his ears. It seems that Yosemite is haunted both outdoors and indoors. The park features a few hotels where, if the stories are true, some guests simply refuse to check out, lingering long after they have left our mortal world. The oldest of these, the Sierra Sky Ranch. Even if you have never been to the hotel, you probably have a good idea of what its incredible interior looks like. When designing the interior sets of the fictional Overlook Hotel for his 1980 horror masterpiece, The Shining, film director and horror master Stanley Kubrick drew upon the Ahwahnee for inspiration. While vast, the interior of the Ahwahnee Hotel is rendered cozy by all the trappings we come to expect from a rustic national park lodge. Massive fireplaces, luxurious animal furs, comfy leather sofas, and a warm yellow light spilling from dozens of chandeliers above. But don't be lulled into a false sense of security by these creature comforts. When you are a guest in the Ahwahnee Hotel, you are never alone. If you guys enjoyed today's episode on the mysteries surrounding Yosemite National Park, go ahead and hit that like button.